click the subscribe button and click the notification bell, and you'll achieve instant awesome status. Look, up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane. No, wait. It's a creature you've never seen before, and it's swooping down to take you, or at least a bit of you, back to its roost to feed upon. Today's episode is all about mysterious creatures seen in the sky, so keep your eyes peeled, not only all around you, but above you as well. If you want your story in an episode of Darkness Prevails, share it with us at darknessprevails.org/submit. Currently, I'm looking for stories about creepy things that happened on road trips or the highway. Also, you can catch and download my podcast at dppodcast.com. It's available for Apple and Android devices. That's dppodcast.com. The Creature. From Lil Mama 85. Location, West Virginia. My dad owns a cabin in northern West Virginia, a couple of counties over from Point Pleasant. Now, my husband and I had an experience a couple of years ago that scared us so badly that we have refused to go back to that place. My dad lets one of his buddies that lives in town grow Christmas trees on his property because it's farmland, but my dad doesn't farm the land himself. He just uses the cabin as a getaway and for hunting occasionally. When his buddy goes to harvest the trees, my dad goes up to help out and in return gets however many trees he needs. My stepmom is usually always by his side, but she had come down with a brutal type of flu and could not go this time. My dad then asked if my husband and I wanted to go on this trip and help out, but at first we refused. Then I got to thinking about it and feeling guilty because my dad isn't in the best of health anymore. When my 19-year-old brother passed away, it completely destroyed him, and he had a light heart attack. Ever since then, his heart has not been the best. Well, I talked it over with my husband, and he said it was up to me. I called my mom to see if she could keep our kids for the weekend, and she said yes. I called my dad and told him we would definitely be going to help him out. That night, I took the kids to my mom's place, packed and loaded our gear with my own pistol and trusty .22. That specific .22 is light and never failed me yet. The following morning, we met my dad and set out on our journey up north. 5 hours of driving, we finally come to the dirt road turnoff, and I will admit my stomach sank and I began to sweat there. I could tell my husband, Neil, was feeling a bit spooked too, or rather intimidated. We soon arrive at the cabin, so we begin to unpack our things and change into warmer clothes, followed by some coveralls. I loaded my pistol and placed it inside its holster, then my rifle and slung it over my shoulder. This is pretty much normal procedure at the cabin when you're going into the woods. We've seen our share of dangerous wild animals out there, so it's better safe than sorry. We go outside and set out on the ATVs. The Christmas trees were on the other side of the property. When we get there, we noticed my dad's buddy isn't there yet, so I ask if he had called him before we left the cabin, to which he hangs his head and sighs, no. I tell Dad to go back and call him, and then we would wait there in case he did show up. Dad agreed and set out back toward the cabin, so Neil and I were left alone in the middle of the Christmas tree forest. I get off the ATV to stretch my legs, and Neil needs to use the bathroom, so he goes a little ways away to do that. As I'm sitting there, alone now, I notice that everything is much more quiet than it was, and now the wind has stopped. I get this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I was ready for anyone to come back. I dreaded being alone any longer. My heart was in my throat, and I was getting so nervous I was beginning to shake. It wasn't just from the cold. I yelled out for Neil and didn't hear anything back. I walked a bit of the ways in the direction he went and yelled for him again. Still, there was nothing. At this point, I knew something was not right. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement among the trees above me. I stopped and stood as still as I could. The silence afterward was abrasive. Then I heard the trees behind me move, and I turned to look and saw a tall, shadowy figure. It was moving beyond the pine trees. I was beyond terrified, and I was screaming Neil's name, but he still did not answer me. I ran back for the ATV. I got on, geared down to start it, and I reached for my key, but there was only air. There was no key in the starter anymore. Neil had probably taken it with him. I knew how to hotwire it, but my dad would be furious, not to mention my hands were shaking so badly that I probably wouldn't be able to. My heart was pounding like a wild drum, and I took a deep breath, knowing I had two choices. One, I could go into the woods to look for Neil and risk coming into contact with whatever made that shadowy silhouette. Or two, I could set off on foot back toward the cabin to get my dad. My mind was racing, but my choice was soon made. I was going to walk back to the cabin where safety was certain. Then I would get my dad and we would come back to look for Neil. I lowered myself off of the ATV and I took off on foot towards the way back to the cabin. It wasn't long before I heard something. "Someone, help me!" It was coming from the forest. Tears were streaming down my face, and I turned and began to run towards Neil's voice. I screamed at Neil to keep yelling so that I could find him. I was running, branches slapping against my face and body, but I didn't dare slow down. I could hear I was getting close because his voice was growing louder now. I kept running toward it. Then I found him. He was sitting against a tree, red fluid streaming down his face. I ran over to him and begged to know what happened. Neil said something big had hit him, and that was all he remembered because he blacked out for a while. I was at a loss. I did not know what to do next, but I knew we could not stay in those woods any longer. I told Neil, "I'm gonna help you up, and we're gonna get the heck out of here." Finally, after a few minutes of pulling and lifting, I got him to his feet. We started walking slowly back through the woods to the ATV, and then we heard it, something running through the trees. We looked at each other and tried to move faster. We kept going, still hearing that thing going right along beside us. We made it to the forest clearing, and we could see the ATV now. Neil said to lean him against one of the trees to go get the ATV. I did as he said, grabbing the key. But as I took the first step after turning back toward the ATV, key in hand, I saw something now in the middle of my path. Something 7 feet tall and covered in hair. The creature looked down at me with hell-colored red ember eyes. I was so scared that I couldn't move at all. All I could do was stare. Then I noticed the creature had wings, black wings that went all the way down to the ground. Neil screamed at me, and I awoke from my shock. I started to move around the creature and made a mad dash toward the ATV. I was nearly there when something grabbed me by my shoulder. I looked and saw 3 large talons gripping me. I was yanked backwards, landing hard against a huge pine tree. I'm sorry, but this is where things get hazy for me. When I came to some time later, I found myself lying at the bed of the cabin. I tried to move, but everything in my body hurt. My dad came into the room. He looked at me and told me not to move, or I might hurt myself worse. I didn't need to be told twice. I looked at my dad and asked what had happened. He said as I was running toward the ATV, he and his friend were coming back, when they saw something huge right behind me. Said it threw me backward, so he and his friend took aim and fired. He was silent after that and would not go into much detail about the creature, as if he was also in disbelief at what we all had seen. I tried to get out of him what happened after that. Finally, he said to me, the creature looked at them, the color draining from their faces. He said that dang thing had fire in its eyes. He saw it spread its wings, scream, and then burst straight up into the air, disappearing into the sky. We don't know what the creature was, but I have a feeling it was the creature from our first night at the cabin all those years ago. Ever since this event, Dad has forbid us from going back there. Even his buddy with the pine tree said he wouldn't go back. As for Neil, he's fine and he's recovered. He's doing quite well, though the marks in my shoulder from that thing's claws seem to be healing slowly, a painful reminder of what we experienced in those woods. Mysterious flying creature. From Jake. Location, Virginia. This happened 2 years ago when I was 17. It was New Year's Eve, and we were all busy partying at our farmhouse. My cousin Joe suggested we go out into the woods to do some stargazing after the celebration. Joe and I had a lot of friends in common since we attended the same school, so we grabbed 2 of them to come with us. It was a cloudy night that night, a full moon as well. We went out into my uncle's old 1964 pickup. After a solid 15-minute ride, we made it to a clearing in the forest. We set up camp there, taking out the equipment we had brought. After spending about 4 hours enjoying the sky and the occasional stars between the clouds, we wrapped everything up and crawled into our tents. We had only pitched 2 tents to save us the trouble of cleaning up. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, I heard a loud, screeching sound coming from the tree line. I peered out of my nylon tent, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever it was making that noise. What I saw next made me want to soil myself. There was this large insect-like humanoid thing. It had dark, unruly hair surrounding its body, and its 2 large compound eyes were staring right towards us. I looked back, trying to wake up my cousin, but he was already wide awake. Then the 2 of us made a break for the other tent. My cousin's friends, however, were already in the truck waiting for us, utterly horrified. We quickly got in after them, and we hit the gas pedal, flooring the truck through the woods. We reached the farmhouse a short while later, but before we left the truck entirely, I happened to turn around, and I saw that same thing flying towards the woods. It had these thick, leathery wings, which seemed to be a cross between the wings of an insect and the wings of a bat. After returning home, I did some research on the thing, hoping to get some answers. It bore a terrible resemblance to the Mothman, a mysterious moth-like creature that is said to be the harbinger of destruction and doom. My uncle lives in Virginia, about 80 or so miles away from Point Pleasant, so I wouldn't be surprised that what we saw that day was the Mothman. Demon in the Woods. From Matt. Location, New Jersey. The only other person who knows of this experience is my grandfather. My grandfather's a farmer that lives in New Jersey. It was about 2 years ago, and I had to visit him at his farm. He'd always been a kind old man, someone I've never seen scared. He had a small white farmhouse. You could always hear the cows there. During the day, I would help him around the farm. It happened one night while I was lying in bed. Have you ever had the feeling that something bad was about to happen? Even the cows outside, which were quite talkative almost all the time, were extremely quiet. I knew that something bad was going down. I got out of bed with a sick feeling in my stomach, and I walked over to the window. There is a single lamp on the outside of the house. With it, I could see the cows nearby. They seemed to be standing still and staring. At first, I was confused as to why. I looked around for a moment longer, then decided to go back to bed. But about an hour later, the spine-tingling scream forced both me and my grandfather awake. He grabbed his rifle, and we met up in the living room, staring out the window. Outside, we saw this strange and massive creature. It looked like a bat, a dog, and a horse all fused together. Its teeth were sinking into one of the cow's hides. My grandfather loaded his rifle, getting ready to fire at the thing through the window. The creature seemed to know that we were there. Maybe it heard my grandfather readying his weapon, because it immediately turned towards us, screamed that same sinister scream again, before giant bat-like wings propelled it into the air. It took it only moments to disappear into the night sky. I turned to my grandpa, panicking, and asked what in the world that was. He didn't answer for a moment. It wasn't until the next day that he told me the story of the Jersey Devil. I didn't believe him at first, but he was quite sincere about it, and it did match the description of that thing we saw outside. We've never seen that horrible creature again, and I'd give anything to keep it that way. Mothman or something else? From Garou. Location, New Jersey. This happened about a week before Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey. I was out with my mother, my two uncles, and my cousins. We were taking a little vacation in Ramapo Mountain State Forest. I was actually quite hyped for this trip. I was a big fan of the woods, having been raised on a farm near forests until I was 10 years old, after which I moved to New Jersey with my mother and sister. We didn't camp. One of my uncles who lived in California had moved here and lived near the forest, so we could stay with him. We stayed that night until 11 p.m. The adults were watching TV then, while me and my 5 cousins played with my uncle's PS4. Around midnight, when everyone was in bed, I had the dumbest idea, which I somewhat regret now. I wanted to go out and explore the forest. I mean, I wasn't looking for trouble, just for something to pass the time. Besides, I was experienced at dealing with foxes trying to eat the chickens during the night back at the farm, so I was confident in handling anything the wilderness had to offer. I grabbed my backpack filled with junk food and basic tools, such as a pocket knife, a flashlight, and other things. Before I set out quietly, I was found out. Not by my uncle or mother, though, but by my 6-year-old cousin Axel. I told him to stay quiet and to not rat me out, but instead he decided to go with me, something I didn't expect from him. So we took off not too far from the house. I didn't want Axel to get scared and cry back to the house, which would give us away, so I tried to take it slow and safe. We found critters along the way, and we both caught some bugs which we put in a jar. It was a fun and calm experience, until we heard it. It was a loud bird cry, almost like an eagle's cry, something I've never heard before until now. It sent shivers down my spine. Axel was saying that we should go back. He was right, because something felt terribly wrong. The sound was very painful, like something was hurt. I had always been a stubborn kid with a dumb amount of courage, so I decided that I needed to see what was going on. I told Axel to stay there, to keep the flashlight on, and to yell my name the moment something happens, if it does. I set out not too far from where I told him to stay. I walked for a few minutes, confident that it was just a bird that I had heard, so I was still pretty calm. Suddenly, I stopped. I stood frozen for a moment as I watched a huge bird raise itself up in front of me. It looked like a giant owl, about the size of a car. It was staring at me with these green eyes. One of its wings seemed injured, caught in a nearby branch. I had my hand on my pocket knife, ready to protect myself if I had to. Suddenly, the creature yanked its wing from the branch and let out another howl of pain. Louder now, of course. And right after that, it must have scared my cousin, because I heard Axel calling my name. In turn, I think this startled the creature before me, which was now flapping its massive wings, flying away and leaving me in a bit of a violent gust. My cousin came running up towards me about 2 minutes later. He screamed and cried. "Are you okay?" he asked, placing his hand on a deep cut I got on my chest. Apparently that animal or creature had cut me when it took off or when it yanked its wing away from the branch. We both rushed home while we both cried, him of terror and me mostly of pain. Halfway on the path, I noticed 2 of my uncles and my mom were rushing out to us. They must have heard the sound of the scream from that owl thing, and they became worried when they realized that we were gone. They scolded the both of us while my mom was tending to my wound. Panicky, she asked me, "What happened to you? Did a bear attack you or something? You had me so worried. Why would you go out in the middle of the night with that and take Axel with you?" I told them what had happened, and everyone seemed to be in shock. Luckily for me, we belonged to a family that believed in the supernatural. However, my uncle, who owned the house, stood silent and simply said, "Son, what you saw was a nahual." That's a shape-shifting creature from our culture. We're of Mexican heritage. It supposedly transforms into animals and can be described mostly as a giant black dog. Whatever I saw that day was not normal. We all decided to go to bed that night, but the following day my family could not stop talking about it. As we returned home, I tried not to think about it. And a while later, when Hurricane Sandy hit, I remember looking out the window. It was nighttime, and I was staring at the trees where I lived. And I swear, I saw it again. A silhouette of a giant bird. Maybe it was just me imagining things, but then again, I was certain it was the same owl that I had seen only a week ago. It wasn't an ordinary bird. From Zach. Location, Tennessee. Where I live, it's your typical countryside, abundant with fields, farms, woods, etc. But there's a lot more to my hometown that meets the eye. I wasn't always a believer in the paranormal or supernatural, but really, no one really is until they have their own experiences. My experiences started back 2 years ago, but it's what I encountered 3 weeks ago that really shook me to my core. It started when I was on the phone with my best friend. I was walking around outside, when out of nowhere, I heard a loud bird-like sound coming from just above me. It was so loud, it shook my bones, made me jump, and I nearly dropped my phone. The sound was otherworldly as well, nothing at all natural. I didn't recognize it. There's no normal animal in this world, especially a bird, that could make that kind of sound. Whatever it was must have been massive. I ran out into my yard and I looked up toward the roof. There was nothing there. Fast forward to the next day. It was storming outside like crazy. The wind was blowing violently, making the entire house shake. Thunder roared across the sky, lightning frequently strobing across the clouds. It was absolutely pouring rain, so it was basically a complete monsoon. To be honest with you, I love this kind of weather, so I was outside in it for as long as I could, playing in mud, getting soaked. Well, while I was doing this, I heard that sound again, the bird-like sound, the one that seemed to shake the earth. But this time, I spotted what was making it. Up in the clouds, I saw a shadow, an absolutely gigantic silhouette. It appeared to be a kind of bird, but there was no bird in the books that was that big. Well, none that were alive anymore, anyway. Its wingspan must have been over 20 feet long. I heard that same bird call again one more time before disappearing behind the thunderclouds. A few days later, another big storm hit. It was just as bad as the last one. Constant rain, crazy thunder, lightning, all that jazz. And again, I was outside running around in it, specifically in the fields near our house. After a while, it began to get dark. It was still storming, of course, and it was getting late, so I thought it'd be best to head home. When I made it back to my backyard, I looked up toward my house, and there it was, perched on our roof. It was this tall, oval-like shaped thing. I didn't know what it was at first, until I saw it spread those huge wings. I heard it call that dreadful bird call again. Then it leapt from my roof and flew over me and over the fields. That was the last time I would see it. Now, mind you, I still hear that call sometimes. Specifically, I swear I hear it just before large thunderstorms. I know it's still out there, and I can't help but wonder when I'm going to see it again. Unknown animals exist all over the world. Many new animals are discovered each day, and there are reaches of the ocean that we have yet to explore. So, who knows what may come falling or soaring out of the sky at any moment. Just like the trees that hide multitudes of animals and insects, clouds might just be great hiding spots for something large, something hungry, before it comes swooping down to make you the next mysteriously missing person. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you've got a story to share with us, go to darknessprevails.org/submit. Specifically, I'm looking for stories about scary experiences on highways and road trips. If you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails. All my patrons get ad-free MP3 downloads of each episode, and they get their names in the credits at the end of my videos on YouTube. Or you can click the shop button below if you're on YouTube, or go to teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails and browse my creepy merchandise. Thank you. As usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 true horror stories in the city. Mike Taekwondo says, "Thank you, Daddy Darkness. Please tuck me in for the night." Oh, I'll tuck you in. Tuck you into this dumpster after I'm done with you. Well, maybe not. Maybe your last name's Taekwondo for a reason. Jack Bjorn Wolf says, "What about the scary fact that I'm a broke artist that eats ramen out of a funeral home mug, using nothing but 2 No. 2 pencils as chopsticks?" That sounds like a story I could feature in an episode. 5 true stories about how life sucks sometimes. I think we could all relate to that one. New Moon 13 says, "I always have to do something scary while listening to these narrations to add more effect to them. That's why I'm doing my math homework as I listen." Whoa, holy crap, we got a boss over here. Commander Chaos says, "Why the F did I get notifications for this video like 6 times? I've been getting it every few minutes for like 20 minutes now." That's strange. It's the opposite of the current problem where no one gets the notifications. But I think I'd rather get no notifications than 6 of them. Sounds annoying. And Kyle Schrader says, "Bruh, who the F dislikes? Like actually, I've never touched that button in my entire life." I notice there are these occasional people who will subscribe and stay notified just to be able to dislike your video right away. I don't know why they do it, maybe they've got nothing better to do with their lives, but considering the dislikes occur on my videos before they even watch it, I think that might be what's going on. Besides that, the majority of my dislikes come from people who just don't like that episode, which I can understand. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode, but don't you get too worried, because more scary stories are on the way, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to support me. Thank you all. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.